Alright, now that we have our texture maps saved out, we're basically going to get right back in 3D Studio Max, and we're going to basically start applying these guys onto some geometry. So right now I'm only working with, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 texture maps. So what we're going to do is, quickly, we're going to build a sort of a quick block out so you can actually see exactly what's going on. And we're going to do a quick render test just so you can see how things are being affected by layers. So what I'm going to do right now is get back in 3D Studio Max, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start off with just a normal plane, and what I'm going to do is just create this guy, 50 by 50 max units. So let's start off with this, and let's quickly again just show you exactly how we're going to set this up. If you use the shortcut M to go to your material editor, I'm going to import some of the texture maps that we just created. Let's start off with the circle, which I call fx_circle1. And right now I have these as Photoshop documents just so I can edit them pretty quickly if I have to in Adobe Photoshop. So right now I'm just going to keep everything as a standard material. I'm putting my texture map in the self-illuminated area, making the color black, and just making everything else black for now. If we click on the material and just show standard map in viewport, you can see what's going on. If we do a quick render, you can see that our texture map looks exactly like we want it to do. Now, let's try something else. Right now there's pretty much no transparency on here. So what I'm going to do is copy this material into the opacity channel, click on the material, and what I'm going to do is just double check to make sure that all my settings are right here. Alright, so everything looks good. So right now there's a little bit of transparency on it, but we're not really working with anything. We're not really working with an alpha channel here. So what I'm going to do is go back into Photoshop, and what I'm going to do is select this image and save this as a JPEG. I'm just going to call this fx_circle1_alpha. Going back to 3D Studio Max, so right now our alpha should be pretty good. So now let's start actually working with the effect that we want to accomplish here. So if I select this plane, right now let's change the timeline to about 500 frames. Let's set up auto key, set up a key at 0, and set up a key at frame 200. Let's rotate this plane 360 degrees. Now what we're going to do is, real quick, we're going to duplicate this object about, say, 3 times. So there's the animation on all these. But what I'm going to do is, for the top one, I'm going to scale it down a bit. I'm going to offset the animation. Actually, I'm going to offset the animation to negative. I'm going to scale this one a bit. And I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. And take this third copy here. Make this bigger. And just bring this a little bit to the back. So we got 3 copies of these objects. I'm going to select all these and I'm just going to do a global rename and just call this fx underscore circle underscore numbered and then rename. So now all of them should be named fx underscore circle. So you can see what we have here. Let me just offset some of the animations on this. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my graph editor and I'm going to go to track view curve editor. What I want to do is make sure that these circles keep rotating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the object I want to rotate, go to modes, actually go to controller, outer range types, click on loop. So you can see in the graph editor it will loop over and over again. So I have this ease in and I have this out right here. I'm going to select these vertices so that there isn't a slowdown when the animation comes to a stop. So I'm going to have to do this for the rest of them. Controller, outer range types, click on loop, and just select your rotation here, and this should be, if you scroll down, this should be the Z rotation, and just click on linear. And I'm just going to do this for the rest of them. So it would have been easy to animate this first, edit these, then duplicate these objects, but sometimes you just make mistakes. So again, to rotate is controller at the top toolbar, outer range types, click on loop, and there you go. So all these should be constantly looping. So you can see what we're doing here. Now let's just take a quick frame render so you can see what's happening. You can see the transparency taking effect. And I'm just going to do another shot from the top so you can see it taking effect. For the sake of it, I'm going to throw in a light at the top here. Not really affecting that much. So quickly, I'm going to create a viewport animation by going to Tools, grab Viewport, create Animated Sequence. So here's the animation that was just rendered. Now we're not going to get the transparency effect through just previewing the animation, but you can see what we are trying to accomplish in this portion. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to actually do a little bit more here, and then I'm going to do an actual render test so we can actually see the transparency in action with other stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create a dummy node, which what I'm going to do is align to the center and select in all my objects besides the node and link it to this dummy. And I'm just going to rename this dummy FX circle master. So now everything's linked to this. I'm going to double click on my master and duplicate it. I can also scale the node. And what I'm going to do again is double click the node. And I'm going to move this down. So I'm going to do another quick render test. So you see what's going on, and you get the idea behind what we're trying to do. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to send out a quick animation, render out these 500 frames so we can see how the animation looks. So what I'm going to do is pause the video for a minute, send out an actual render, and come back and show you guys exactly how it looks. Alright, welcome back. So let's take a look at the animation that we just rendered out of 3D Studio Max. So you can see, again, the goal that we're trying to do here. So what we're going to do now is, now that you've seen basically the principles of what we're trying to do here, we're going to iterate on this, and we're going to start putting together our actual effect and everything that we saw from our concept. So we're going to do a lot of cleanup, and we're going to do a lot of more focusing on just the major parts. So other than rotation, we're also going to be dealing with a lot of other stuff. We're going to be dealing again with linking things to nodes and just creating different type of groups to duplicate effects that we did on one part and add it to another part. So again, you got the idea. So now let's iterate on exactly how we're going to put the thing together in a more final look. Alright, so I'm going to actually start with a clean scene. I deleted all the other planes that we were dealing with. So what we're going to do is we're just going to continue with just this one animation right here. One thing I want to give you guys a heads up about. Earlier we had, when we were rotating, they were a little bit off. What you want to do is just make sure that your canvas size of your texture map exactly is square, and that your object is centered in the middle here. So as I changed it to 612 by 612 just to make sure that it stays as a square and it's not off by anything. But yeah, if there's any weird rotation, just double check to make sure your texture size are right and that your pivot points in Max are centered to the middle of the circle. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to take a look at my concept here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the middle portion of these circles right here. So going back to Max, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work from a top-down view. I'm going to duplicate this material. I'm going to duplicate this object, sorry. Just bring it down below the first one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just name the material fx_circle. Circle 1. Duplicate the material, call that circle 2. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to affect the alpha channel so that this one is a little bit more transparent. So what I'm going to do is, under your bitmap options, just scroll down to the output tab, and you can mess with the output amount value, and I'm going to lower this one a bit, And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick render test. There we go. I'm going to open up my graph editor and just take a look at where my frame is. And I'm actually going to bring that up a bit just to offset it. Then what I'm going to do is duplicate that material again. Just bring it up a bit. Gonna duplicate the material, call this circle 3, and change the alpha properties under output. Make this one a little bit more brighter in transparency, so we can see the effect. I'm just going to offset this animation a bit. Go back to my top view, do a render. I'm going to duplicate the largest one again and just place it a little bit under the one we just had. Offset the animation and create another material. Call this one fx underscore circle underscore 4. Apply that to the one we just created and change the output amount of the alpha a lot more. And then let's do a render test. Alright. Going back to my top view. And I'm just going to do another render test. And I think we're matching the concept pretty well so far. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to duplicate this piece of geometry. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this material, but I'm going to add a different texture map to it. So I'm going to call this one fx underscore circle underscore b1, and bring in fx underscore circle 2 texture map. Now I need to create a alpha from this. So what I'm going to do is control copy my green layer. I want the alpha to be a little more brighter, so I'm just going to steal. I can't do it like that, so I'll just go to adjust levels. And I'll adjust the brightness a bit too. I'll copy this and I'll just save out a JPEG. Call it fx underscore circle underscore 2 alpha. What I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to redo it, because you can see the glow is starting to hit the edges, and we'll see that when we place it onto the geometry plane. So what I'm actually going to do is scale this down a bit. Actually, you know, we can't scale it down. Let's just go back and fix this texture map. So I'm just going to scale this down a bit, save it. Then what I'm going to do is select low selection and just paint this into the alpha channel. Then I'm going to select all, copy, and just save this as the alpha. Alright, so let's go back into Max. Click on opacity, and let's change this alpha to fx underscore circle underscore alpha and place that. So now we have a variation of circles happening. And I'm actually going to change this to fx underscore circle underscore b. And I'm going to duplicate this and place it somewhere in the middle and just rename it fx underscore circle underscore b underscore 2 actually. We're just going to scale it up a bit. Now we have to fix the pivot point a bit because it's off. So I'm just going to double check the pivot point and fix my pivot point so that it's directly in the middle of the circle. And I'm going to do that for the second one I duplicated. Just make sure the pivot point is in the middle. It's a little bit off, but it's still fine. Now let's do another render. Not bad so far. So let's do another render test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a bit. I'm going to send out another render because it's going to take a while. And I'll come back and show you the results. Alright, welcome back. My render just finished. And let's take a look at the preview. So far, pretty cool. Alright, so we got the principles of what we're trying to accomplish here down pretty good. There's a lot of adjustment that we can do, but we're going to bother that. We're going to worry about that later in the demonstration, either in post effect or we'll start tweaking some of the materials also. But there's a lot at this point that you can do and play around with. But again, we're just trying to build everything together. Just so we can bring in the particle effects and add more detail to all this. So still got a few more stuff to cover. So now that I have this set up, I'm going to bring in some of the windows, and what we're going to do is we're going to start animating some of the vertices to turn on some of these little windows that are going to be appearing. So we already have our texture maps for that. So let's get right into that part. So now let's move on to bringing in our windows. I'm going to go back to Bridge and show you one of the windows that we're going to be using, which will basically just appear on, which we're going to use just using scale in the vertices. So what I'm going to do is go open my layers. So I'm just going to start organizing all these. First thing first, what I want to do is create a dummy like we did before. I'm going to center this to the middle, and I'm just going to select similar, or I can't. I'm going to select all of these graphic objects and just link it to this one node that we created right here. And I'm going to name this node, this dummy, to master circle underscore fx, and add those to a new layer called fx circle. So for now we can turn these off. Oh, let me just copy these into the fx circle layer by right clicking, add select objects. Now let's look at the windows. Just make sure that you're in a new layer, or a layer that's not invisible. I'll call this fx underscore window. Oops. And let's bring in our window material. What I'm actually going to do is copy by holding Control and dragging it into a new material slot. Call this fx underscore window. And what I'm going to do is look for our FX window, and let's create an alpha channel for it. I'm going to save that as a JPEG, call it FX_window, save it, go back to Max, go to my opacity, and select the FX window. So let's apply this to the plane mesh we created, which we're going to rename to FX_window_1. Now here's the animation part. We're basically simply just going to scale these, scale the vertices up. So basically what we're going to do is just animate the length. If it's still a plane, you can animate the length, or if it's a polygon, you can just animate the vertices. For the sake, we're just going to click on wire. We're just going to change this to wireframe. Click on this, and let's just make sure that our segments are 1 to 1. I'm going to add an edit poly modifier on here, and I'm going to start animating this plane. Turn auto key on. I'm going to set a key, and I'm going to set another key at 20. And I'm going to push these vertices into each other. Okay. And let's actually try that again. I'm going to delete that. I'm actually going to control, edit, undo all that. Let's delete that. It's that key we made. And let's just, again, just drag the vertices into each other. Alright, that's apparently not working. So let me try that again. Alright, let me just collapse. Alright, so let's try that again. I'm going to auto keys on. I'm just going to drag my vertices into each other. So there you go. I think because of the hierarchy of having the actual shape and having the editable poly modifier on top caused some animation issues. So you might want to just double check that just in case if you're having trouble. So I'm going to just go to camera, go back to smooth and highlights on my viewport, and you can see that's exactly what it's going to be doing. And let's just drag the keyframes to about, let me see, so it should be fairly quick. So I'm just going to put that to 5. Now the animation's going backwards, so what we can do is go to Graph Editor, Track View, Dope Sheet, and we can actually click on FX Window 1. Let's zoom in so we can see our keyframes, and we can actually reverse these keyframes. So what we can do is just drag this, drag the other one, and it should be going the right way now. So let me just open up my material slot again. So I'm going to duplicate, let me see, I'm just going to duplicate this object again, like how I did for the circles we did. Just gonna duplicate this and I'm just going to scale it down a bit so the animation's still there. If we have them selected, you can see the animation. And I'm just going to position this. I'm going to duplicate again. I'm actually just going to change the axis that it's on. Scale this. And I'm just going to put it like right here. So if you select all of them, you can see the animation is going. And I'm just gonna put them near each other. So what I'm gonna do is offset some of the animation a bit. So I'm just gonna drag these so that when the animation plays, one pops up, second one pops up, then the third one pops up. And what I'm gonna do is take a look at my concept again. And sort of position some windows where they are, and then I'll just mirror the ones I create to the other side. So let's just try to match the concept the best we can. Just gonna zoom out, and I'll just scale these up a bit. And let me just take another look at my concept. And let's just position it the best we can. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mirror these guys and use the mirror tool just to mirror them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select in the layers, I'm going to select all the objects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link them to another dummy. So let's try that again. I'm going to select all my objects. I'm going to hide the circles and link these to this dummy. So this dummy is in control. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. So now this dummy right here is control of the windows. We'll call this master underscore windows. So if we take a look, these windows should pop up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate these windows again by selecting the master node, double click on the master node and selecting all the objects, and I'm actually going to offset the animation a bit so that when it plays they all start popping up on a different offset. And what I'll do is I'll duplicate this guy again, change the axis, then change the offset. Here we go. Alright, so we're going to take a little quick break. I'm going to render out this animation so we can actually take a look at it. Alright, so we just finished rendering out a test animation, so let's just take a look at it real quick. So there you go. You can see that the windows appeared offset, which is good, blending in with the background animation that we created. So we're going to continue to iterate on this. And we're going to just keep adding some of the texture maps that we created earlier into it and just throw in things here and there and just see how things fit. Add in some of the text effects and stuff like that, but you pretty much get the idea of how we're trying to build this. Again, it's just basically taking how we layered everything into Photoshop and to add it into basically into Max. And again, reusing the same assets to create stuff and offsetting animations to basically just get more variation into the effect. So we're going to continue iterating on this, and what we're going to do is add in some of the text stuff that we saw earlier in the concept. Alright, so let's bring in some of the text for this. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to call this fx underscore text. So this is going to be the text that's going to be scrolling up and down on top of all the windows. So let's go to your material editor and let's duplicate any of the materials we already created. Let's call it fx underscore text, and let's look for the text material, this guy right here that we created. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to go back into Photoshop and just save out an alpha channel. Oops. And I'm just going to call it fx underscore text underscore alpha. Okay. And let's go in back into Max. Let's go to our material and let's go to opacity and let's click on that text. Now, what I'm going to do just to quickly add in the materials, I'm just going to select some of the big text windows we have right here. I'm just going to duplicate those, and what I'm going to do is do a batch rename by renaming all of them. Go to Tools, Rename Objects. I'm just going to call it fx underscore text underscore by number. Rename it, and what I'm going to do now is add select objects to the layer that we created. So now they all should be called fx underscore text underscore their given number. Take your material and let's just apply it to this. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to animate the offset that's located under the bitmap properties of your materials. To do that, we're basically just going to go back, click on auto key. I'm gonna, let me see, I'm just gonna start with 0.01, and then I'm gonna frame 100 and just bring this up to about 3.0, I guess. So what should happen is, if we look close, you can see that the text should be animated vertically. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to do a quick little preview here, and just to see, actually let's go to graphic editor, curve editor, and let's make sure that we loop the material offset animation we did. Now to do that, just look for the material that we created. You can go to Medit Materials and just look for fx underscore text maps. Actually, you know what? We need to, what we did here is we animated in the opacity map. So what we should do is we need to copy the same values that we did for this to the self-illuminated material we have here. So I'm going to click back on auto key. I'm going to type in 0.01. I'm going to go to frame 100. And then 3.0. So in the viewport, you should now see that all the text should be moving up and down vertically. So I'm going to go back to my top view. I'm just going to zoom out just a bit. And you can see the text moving vertically. Now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to duplicate this, and I'm just going to start, I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to bring it a little bit to the back of the circular effects that we did. And then I'm going to duplicate that and just mirror it So I'm just gonna select, I'm gonna create another dummy. I'm gonna call this master text, and I'm going to make sure that all that's linked. I'm gonna isolate this. I'm gonna make sure that all the text stuff is linked to that particular node. Okay, perfect. So let's do another test render. So I'm going to pause it again. I'm going to pause this recording again, and let's do a test render, and I'll come back and show you the results. Alright, welcome back. Our animation is finished, so let's actually take a look at it. There you go. We got the text move in, we got the windows animated, we got the circular part rotating. So we're pretty much getting there, and you know, it's starting to look good. So right now, I mean, everything's still a little bit plain, but don't worry, we're gonna add glow effect later on. So we're pretty much almost done. There's just a matter of adding a little bit more detail, a little more stuff happening. So you know, there's still a lot of things we could do, and there's still a lot of things we can experiment with. So let's iterate a little bit more on this, add a little bit more of the graphic maps that we created, and start thinking about how we can just add a little bit more to it, a little more flavor, and have it flow just a little more better. Alright, so let's add in a little bit more animation and throw in a little bit more detail into the into pretty much the final steps of the animation. So what I'm going to do right here, I'm actually going to animate the circles on, and I'm just going to do that by scale. I'm just going to put my auto key on. Click on auto key. I'm going to go to frame 20 for now. I have all my circles selected, so you can do that just by selecting the fx_circle layer, and just select all the fx_circle geometry that you made. So I'm on frame 20. I'm actually just going to scale all this, and what I'm going to do is right click on the, let me see, right click on filter, or let me see, and just change all this to 0, 0, 0. And do the same thing for circle B, 0, 0, 0. I'm right clicking on FX circle B2, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Now the problem that we have right here is that since we have a loop happening for the circles, it's going to keep scaling this up and down, up and down, up and down. But let's leave it on just so we can see exactly how just how the effect looks and stuff like that. So I'm going to do another quick render test just so we can see exactly how it looks. So I'm just going to pause the video for a second and come back and show you the results. Alright, so welcome back. So we just finished rendering out our animation. So let's just take a quick look at it. So as I was saying earlier before, right now because we are scaling everything while it's looping, it's causing the scale to loop. Probably a easy way for us to get around that is basically we can actually just scale the node that all of it's attached to. So first, let me just make sure that all my circles so what I'm going to do is select a node that they're all linked to, I'm going to click auto key, and I'm going to make a keyframe at frame 0 and then the keyframe at frame 20. And what I'm going to do is just scale this all the way to 0. And you can see the geometry is rotated, but the master node that's connected to does not loop, so that's good. A easy way to fix animation problems like that is to just animate stuff on the geometry, but you have to move stuff around in a weird way. You can just link everything to the master node, and the master node can be animated and scaled. So good reason why to link things to a dummy, because it's helps for animation problems and to help us organize all of our groups of pieces of animation we have here. Alright, so I'm going to add just a little bit more of windows and add in a few more pieces of geometry. So what I'm going to do is go back to my material editor. I'm going to duplicate again material, and I'll call this fx underscore dash underscore circle. We're going to find that texture map that we created with the dash outline, and I called it fx underscore circle 3. And we're going to use this and duplicate this guy around our circles that we have in the middle. And what we're going to have to do is let's just double check and let's create an alpha from that. And let's just open that up again. Okay, and we're going to copy and paste the blue channel here, and let's just copy the alpha, and we're going to save this and call it fx underscore circle 3 alpha. Let's go back to Max. Let's go back to our dash circle material, click on opacity, and look for the alpha that we have right here. Perfect. And I'm actually going to unlink this since we duplicated from the circle and create a new FX layer called dash. And we're just going to duplicate this guy in and around and let's do a quick little render of all this just to see how it looks. So cool, we're getting a lot more really cool effects here, and I'm actually going to change my aspect ratio and my output size so you can actually see, add in all these little details are really cool. And the angle that we actually have this at is also really nice, because everything is pretty much in 3D, so everything is pretty much popped up and not flat. So let me do another render test so you can see some of the effects here. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to add a little bit more windows, taking a cue from what we did for this. Let's throw in a few more pieces of geometry, add different type of texture maps, and sort of try to iterate as much as you can on you know, matching the concept that we showed you earlier. And you know, another good opportunity to experiment a little bit more for the design. You feel like there's things to be added that would help emphasize the animation or emphasize the effect. So in the next section, we're actually pretty much going to finish up here, but we're actually going to just start um, moving on to the next section. So feel free to do as much as you can in this portion. Throw in a little bit more windows, add a little more circles. Because in the next section, we're actually going to go over basically doing a little more cleanup. We're going to go over basically rendering, lighting, and materials, and sort of put together the scene from bringing the particle stuff that we did in and just putting everything into the scene and just trying to get everything together so that everything flows together. So I hope you guys enjoyed this section, and I'll see you guys in the next one.